If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Welcome to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello, today we have Sonia interviewing John about natural morality. We are continuing from the previous episode today. We hope you enjoy.
What logical fallacies do we see here? When you say everybody knows that, it's a fallacy called argumentum ad populum. Appeal to the masses, appeal to the people. Everybody knows it. Yeah, there might have been, once upon a time, a day when everyone knew the world was flat. It still wasn't. Just having a lot of people believe something, even if everybody believes it, that doesn't make it true. So that's an illogical argument. It's a fallacy. There's an ad hominem in here as well, an attack against the man. If somebody doesn't see that it's wrong, that person needs a therapist, not an argument. Well, we might think that that's the case, but again, that's our opinion. This is attacking the person. If he doesn't see it's wrong, well, we're not going to argue that it's objectively wrong or give evidence that it's objectively wrong. We're going to say he's crazy. He needs a therapist. That's an attack on the person. It's not an argument. That's also a logical fallacy. There's even a veiled appeal to consequence here, another logical fallacy, because it's almost a veiled threat. Well, if you don't agree, you're going to be shut up in an asylum. And now that brings up this point that in the old Soviet Union, for example, and probably other communist countries, believing in Jesus meant that you needed a therapist. And there were Christian believers who were shut up in insane asylums. Why? Because they believed in Jesus. And everybody there knew that a person who believes in Jesus needs a therapist, not an argument. So you see that this is not an argument for absolute truth, is it? Now, another thing he does, and which came up in the first one as well, is going to the most extreme example. You know, torturing an innocent baby for fun is wrong. Well, of course it is. But does everybody know that? There are, in the United States, some 625,000 plus abortions every single year. Many of them are well past the point where the baby feels pain. And he is killed in a very brutal fashion that cannot be described as anything other than torture. In the United States and in Canada, we have what's called partial birth abortions, where a baby is actually coming out of the birth canal, but is not fully out. For the want of another 2 or 3 minutes, he can be tortured to death. And let's say, well, it's not for fun. Well, it is really, because most of these abortions are for convenience. Having a baby will interfere with my lifestyle, my pursuit of happiness, and my pursuit of fun. So obviously, a lot of people don't. Even on this extreme illustration, torturing an innocent baby for fun, not everybody knows it. I just saw quite a frightening article in the news today. In 2021, last year, 1% of Democrat voters, 1% of them said that protecting the right to abortion, the right to torture innocent babies for fun, 1% said that's the most important issue for them. Now in 2022, it's up to 13%. So here's the problem. You can pick the most extreme example you want. You're not going to be able to show that everybody knows that it's wrong.
Well, can it be argued that they know it, but they've seared their conscience because they want to do what's more convenient for them?
Well, you could argue that, but you couldn't prove it. That's the problem. That's the kind of argument, the no true Scotsman kind of fallacy where, you're just not admitting the truth. Everybody knows it's wrong. Well, here are people who don't know it's wrong. Well, they're lying. They actually know it's wrong. That's not an argument. That cannot prove anything. It may be true, but you can't prove it. Remember, this is supposed to be an argument for the existence of God. You have to give evidence. You can't just assume that everybody knows it and then use that to prove the existence of God. That's a circular argument. Petitio principii, another logical fallacy. Now, let's continue. He also says, I often tell my students, I'll say, if someone tells you there's no such thing as right and wrong, cut in front of them in line. What are they going to say? That's not fair. That's not right. As if there's really an objective standard we're both accountable to. Now, we saw the same kind of thing in the Dr. Craig video. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I think he's upset that you cut in front of him in line. That's not fair. That's not right. But if he had a chance to cut in front of you in line, then he might not say that, or he might not care.
Indeed, he might not care. In addition to that, here's the thing. This is supposed to be an argument for the existence of God. If you're arguing for the existence of God, you're arguing against people who don't believe there's a God at all. So these are people who would be atheists who would hold to a naturalistic view of a life. They would believe in the theory of evolution, for example. And you'd have to convince them that morality is more in keeping with the concept of a God than would develop naturally. Now, they will point out, for example, in this matter, if you look at a lion, it's just killed a zebra or something, it's eating it. Well, if a hyena comes along and tries to grab it, the lion will go after that hyena. He will not let the hyena essentially cut in front of him, will he? And it's not being done from any kind of higher moral standard. It's not because the lion understands that, hey, there's objective morals here. It's not right for the hyena to cut in front and take my food. Absolutely not. It's just obviously an evolved development that the lion wants his food and needs food to live and will not allow others to take from him. So the fact that people complain if somebody takes something from them or cuts in front of in a line for them, if they complain, that's absolutely not proof that he believes in an objective standard we're both accountable to, nor would it be a proof that there is such an objective standard, even if he believed it. Now, McDowell goes on to say this. The other thing C.S. Lewis points out in his book, The Abolition of Man, is that across cultures, universally, throughout history, there are certain moral truths that people are committed to. Things like courage, things like faithfulness, mercy, caring for posterity. Now, the practice of these moral principles may vary, he says, but there are universal moral truths that people are committed to. What do you think? Is this a good argument?
Well, mercy definitely wouldn't be on that list, but even for things that could possibly be on the list, they're things that you might need for the society to survive, and that would explain why they're across cultures, not because everyone believes they're right. Like courage, I suppose, if you have to fight to keep your country intact from invaders, that's something that applies to every country, theoretically. Although, if you look at it, there are some cultures that have people with courage and others that don't, even with that. So it's just not true.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that. It's not true. This is a claim that Lewis made and is often made after him. But when you look at the facts, you don't find that at all. Consider something like murder, because murder is usually brought up as one of these universal truths. Every human society is against murder. But here's the question. How do you define murder? Unauthorized, unlawful killing. And yes, in our society, we're against murder. Murder of anybody. In theory, anyway.
Well, except the unborn children.
Except the unborn children. So it's already difficult to argue that everybody knows murder is wrong. But when you compare societies, there are societies like ours where killing anybody without proper justification was wrong. But in many, perhaps most cultures, there were strictures against killing people in the community. But there were no strictures against killing people outside the community. Quite the opposite. It was often seen as a good thing. They're competitors for your resources. You will go and make war on them. You will kill them and take their goodies. And so even on these fundamental things, they say very strong strictures against adultery, for example. Yes, again, because if you're living in a society where the perpetuation of society is based on creating and raising a next generation, you're not going to put in the time and effort to raise a child unless you're sure he's yours. What you find as you look through these values, not surprisingly, the ones that are universal, supposedly universal, are the very ones that are necessary for people to live in community. Ever since the earliest days, it was necessary to live in community. Groups of people can do things that one lone individual cannot. If you look back at, say, ancient Mesopotamia, where the first recorded civilization developed, the one from which Abraham came, this was a land that was flat, hot, swampy, with no timber, very little building stone. And so to have a city there, you needed to build walls, build dwellings, all out of mud bricks. You needed irrigation ditches to grow crops. And these are not things individuals could do. It was necessary for people to live in community, and to do that, there are certain values that they have to hold on to. And if we see these values being the universal ones, but not the other ones, then it becomes a very difficult thing to argue that these are there because everybody knows they're right. On things that are not essential to survive as a community, societies actually had very, very different views. What about marriage? Monogamy versus polygamy. The role of women. What kind of rights do women have? Human sacrifice. There are many societies that practice human sacrifice. The Aztecs, for example, would take human victims up to the top of their flat pyramids and plunge a flint knife into their chests and rip out their still beating hearts. They obviously thought this was right. They didn't do that thinking this was wrong. They thought it was right. What about the issue of slavery? There was a time when every single society in the world thought it was right. They practiced it. Apparently, even slaves had no belief that this was objectively wrong. They didn't like being slaves, but they didn't think the institution was wrong. Now, does everybody think it's wrong? No, there's still countries and still cultures that practice slavery. We in the West, of course, are sure that it's wrong. And it's interesting, as we saw before, that the Dr. Craig video mentioned racial discrimination. Well, there was a lot of that. Society, at first, almost all of them thought it was right. And then people became convinced that it's not. And you ended up fighting a civil war over it. And now everybody thinks it's wrong. But that then raises the question, if they're objective moral values, do they change through time? And if they do, are they objective? When everybody knew that slavery was right, was it right? Now that everybody knows it's wrong, has it become wrong? Was it wrong all the time? It becomes very, very difficult when you do compare cultures across the world and across time to argue that any sort of shared values is proof that there's objective morality. Any comments on that?
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to another apologist then, Dr. Frank Turek. Let's listen to him try to make the case for objective morality.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part, same time and same place. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.